This is Whitley Strieber, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
On a starry night, when everything was right. Oh, time had gone by. All the times we got high. We could have seen the future, but there was always some kind of bar. Can you look me in the eye? Yeah, or can you tell me you always get on by? If you say yes, I know it's a lie. If you say no, I suggest you go get high. Oh, seems there's only ever going to be enough room to get by. Can I see behind your mask? Was never a question we could ask or answer. Oh, I'll sit alone on my porch. Yeah, sing me a song that burns like a flaming torch. We're all gonna get by.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, and welcome to My Alien Life, the podcast. So, been an interesting week. News-wise, did Don Bromley photograph an alien? If you read the news, this story broke worldwide. I just found out about Don's photo from my RSS feed off the UK's online version of The Mirror, and I had heard about it previously, but The Mirror says, according to a Montana man, he claims to have evidence of alien life after his hunting camera recorded a naked bulbous figure running through a UFO hotspot. The eerie image shows what it looks like, a gray humanoid darting around a field in the rural area of Redgate, Montana. The hunter who took the photo, Donald Bromley, said initially he thought the creature was a person, but the more he looked at the image, the more he became convinced that it had extraterrestrial origins, the Sun Online reported. Donald's camera was set up in Redgate, Montana, which is a town near Deer Lodge, Montana, which believers claim is a beacon for UFO sightings and out-of-this-world existences. Speaking to a local outlet, KXLF, naked alien witness Mr. Bromley said, the more I look at it, it's just odd. It was out of place and everything just matches the alien persona, the big bulbous head, and you can tell that he has no clothes. It's kind of a transparent being. It's just very rich in paranormal, like UFOs, lights in the sky, unexplainable things. And tonight, of course, I would like to invite my two guests, John Emeigh, and Don Bromley. John is in Butte, Montana. And Don, I'm assuming that you're in Deer Lodge, Montana, or somewhere near.
Deer Lodge it is.
Right
Correct.
on. So tonight we have three Montana boys. Don, I think you're from Montana. Are you originally from Montana?
Born and raised in Deer Lodge. Yep.
All right. And I want to start out, if anybody, John Emeigh got to interview me a while back, and it was a great pleasure to meet John. I've been following on Facebook. I feel John and I are friends. Every time I go through Butte, which is fairly often, I stay in a hotel, I watch John on the news, and which I think is really cool because he's done everything in the area that you could possibly do for, recreation, sports, covers the news there very, very well. And he had a week. John, when did you do the week about the paranormal of Montana? That was when?
That was back, I think, last spring. And
that was a lot of fun. He did a bunch of stories.
If I knew this was a history test, I'd have the date. But I think it was, and Don was there. It was kind of April-ish. It was what the phony Montana spring that we had.
Right.
But yes.
So just so you know, we normally I don't do a bio for my guests here. I kind of allow them to do that themselves. And I kind of like to have you give your background and how you got to Montana, John, because I know you're not from Montana, but you fit in really, really well. I want you to know.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I love it here. This is home now. No, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. Lived there for a few years. Also grew up in Baton Rouge. Went to school at Southeastern Louisiana University. Go Lions! And I've since then have worked in papers in little towns in Louisiana, Ohio, the Midwest, Indiana, and before I finally, about 15 years ago, came out here to Butte, Montana, where I initially worked at the Montana Standard newspaper. I was a newspaper guy, I should say, all this time, and for the past 7 years, I've been in television here at KXLF in Butte.
So do you recall I don't remember how many stories, I think you did 5 stories. You did one with me on that week last spring. And can you kind of rehash those and let everybody know what we kind of talked about and what you covered? Because Montana, as Don knows, is a UFO hotspot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was a 2-part series. They were quite long. I mean, they're for a television news spot, a package we call it, and it was back in spring, maybe just before, maybe around. It might have been around June. Now that I think about it, because I got interested in it, as we all remember last year. The government was releasing documents about UFO sightings. We heard about that Office of Aerial Phenomenon that they were investigating. I've always been into UFOs. I found them fascinating subject. So when learning about that, the government was essentially saying, we're going to be a little transparent. They released some footage that certainly was unidentified objects that the Navy had shot. So I thought about, Montana. I've heard many stories about strange sightings and UFOs and things like that. And I'm a kind of reporter that, to me, that's a fascinating subject. I don't avoid it. I mean, I've written about them before. I think it's a fascinating subject. Some people, scientists, reporters, are afraid of scrutiny, and they don't, as we know, they tend to avoid the subject. But I wanted to explore it. And the fact that our government was releasing documents in a report about unidentified aerial phenomenon, I thought that was a good time to do it. So I did several stories. I interviewed you. I interviewed Cameron. I've interviewed Don Bromley about the Redgate area, which I've heard years, many stories about that, just strange sightings. And there was so much material. I turned it into 2 very long packages, and it was like a 2-part series that ran over that time during that week. And it's been really well received. I'm surprised at the attention it had gotten. And I'm glad, because I think the UFO phenomenon deserves just as much attention as anything that mainstream reporters cover on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we have several sites in the state that are very, very well known and gained some notoriety for that. And also, if people don't know that Montana, in Clancy, Montana, which is kind of a suburb of Helena, Montana, we have a Jesse Marcel museum. And go figure. I mean, that's he's basically highlighting an experience that took place, decades ago in a land quite far away from Montana. And still, it's one of the kind of go-to places for people who are into that and have researched it and want to know more about it, which I know people who have done that for years. So it's very amazing that we have these places and I've kind of based this podcast. The whole thing got started because of experiences I've had in central and North Montana. It's just a really, really odd place. So I want to go to Don Bromley because obviously Redgate is one of those places, Don, in Montana that you know about. Not everybody in Montana knows about, but talk about who you are, Don. Talk about Deer Lodge first and then kind of go to the Redgate area and what you know about that area, if you would, please.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting being raised in Deer Lodge. It's a pretty small town. There's only a few big entities for jobs. But it's in between, Missoula, Bozeman, Helena. It's centrally located. It's been interesting being part of learning the entire Redgate history just from childhood on. When I was 16, a film producer produced a movie called The Secret of Redgate. And he actually aired it at the Rialto Theater, our one theater in town. And it was on his findings and some firsthand witness of what these people were seeing in these mountains. And it was weird. It was enough to really grab my attention because very prominent people have some very interesting stories. But granted, in the documentary itself, there's a few people that are playing it off as a hoax. And, they just did it as a joke. But in reality, there's more true stories about Redgate than there is false. So I've always really been intrigued by that whole persona of Redgate and what that looks like. So it was only natural for me years later to capture this image on my trail cam and to start questioning it right away. Like, maybe this is a little deeper than what I'm actually looking here, surface level.
So where exactly is it in relation to Deer Lodge? Because I've tried to find it and I don't really know. And then the other question is, where did the name come from?
So Redgate itself is the mountain range to the due east. It'd be the Boulder Mountains east of Deer Lodge. Now, to know where that actual line, where it stops and starts, it's very fuzzy. If you asked people, where is Redgate, Montana? And most people don't actually have a specific location. It's pretty much, 10, 20 mile range up in the mountains. It's just eerie enough. It's just eerie enough.
So obviously you're a hunter, Don, and that sometimes entails some scouting of that area. Is it an area that you frequent and hunt up in that area? Is that how you found yourself there?
I actually worked for a ranch, about a 10,000 acre ranch in the quote unquote Redgate area. And I have a pile of trail cameras. That's definitely a big scouting tool I've used through the years. So I had, at the time, probably 30 cameras in this area. Yep, wow. At least, probably more, honestly. But that's how I kind of led into this area, getting this picture. To hit on your question earlier, too, Redgate, and this, I'm not sure the credibility to this. Apparently, a man in the 1800s killed his family, and he painted the gate to his property red with their blood, and that is how Redgate got its name.
Yeah, and I heard that story too, and I don't, I couldn't corroborate it in any way. I mean, it's right. If you try to research the details on that, they're few and far between.
Right. I have as well. I
think it's really one of those things. It's such a good story. You'd hope it's true. It's so awful,
right?
But it adds to the mystery of it, doesn't it?
Agreed, 100%.
I mean, the whole area is full of stories like that, and you're talking about Butte, Montana, Deer Lodge, Montana. The whole area, Anaconda, Montana, is the stories, the lore, the history is absolutely amazing. If you ever get a chance to go to any of those places, Deer Lodge, Montana is home to the current Montana State Prison, as well as the old historical Montana State Prison. I had a guest who spent some time there, had a 40-year term at the old Montana's prison, and was let out in 2 years. And, he's a pretty popular actor, character actor, and still is, Troy Evans, and he was on the show. And the stories that came out of that place, in addition to his alone, are absolutely amazing. And then Butte, Montana, one of my favorite places in the world. I've never, ever met as many nice people anywhere, I don't think, as in Butte, Montana. If you ever want to go to a bar, doesn't matter what bar it is, could be the lowest end bar of the town. It doesn't matter who's there. It's just everybody could be there. I mean, everybody frequents even the worst bars in town, but you will never have to pay for a drink if you're out of town. And found myself in that position several times. Enjoyed the people of Butte until I was like, they almost had to bring me home in a body bag. So I heard lots and lots of stories, and I always ask people who I meet. John, I was the last time there. One of my favorite places, not so much now since the remodel, was the Goodwill Tavern up on the hill there, and met people up there who literally 4 years later. It was just like I walked in. They're like, "Hey, you're that guy." Yeah, I am. I can't believe you remember that so long ago. And oh yeah, you were here with, and so how have you found that, John? I mean, as far as the historical facts and stories and lore that come with that city. I mean, that was probably at one point the biggest city in west of the Mississippi River, if I'm not correct.
It was. I think it only competed with San Francisco. It was a major stop. I mean, they say at one point in time, Butte could have had in its heyday up to close to 100,000 people. 90 to 100,000 people. I mean, it had theaters everywhere. Charlie Chaplin was stopped there. Mark Twain would do speaking tours there. I mean, it really was a metropolitan city. It was not, when I talk about Butte, when you look at the old pictures of Butte, Montana, you don't see a cowboy hat. You see bowler hats and cities it looks like Chicago, right? Back in the 30s. So it's a city and I mean a metropolitan. It had that vibe, and Butte is very much linked to its arm in arm to its history. And there's something about the people here that they are connected to that history, and something about a mining town. I think a friend of mine, a songwriter, Chad Okrish, he wrote a lyric that said, he sits by a group of his best friends he never met before. That's how Butte, that is a real Butte thing. You sit down with a couple of guys and they're your buddies before you know it.
Yeah, absolutely true. I would agree with that. And if you look at the background there of John's office, John is in a historical building, and at one time, massive historical buildings were up for grabs in that town. I mean, you could get them for, I would say, if I say pennies on the dollar, that's an exaggeration, because it was less than that. And if those buildings weren't blown up and stuff like that occurred into up until 1989, there was things that were just sketchy happening in that city.
Arson.
Arson and whatever. You could pick up some prime real estate now, which, I can see a comeback to that city, because every city in Montana right now is exploding. People are moving in with kids and relatives, and it's absolutely amazing. And Don knows too. And in Deer Lodge, I can't even imagine. I mean, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and of course, Don, where you work, just absolutely amazing. I'm sure your population will explode. People are buying up Montana real estate right now. It's incredible. Yep. And I'm not saying I'm enjoying that part of this, because this was my place to kind of escape and to remain anonymous for most of my life. But it's not So Don, what I was thinking about, you talked about having all these trail cams and setting up to 30 trail cams. I'd like people to know, if they're not hunters, if they're not into that. I mean, there's hobbyists who just set up trail cams for hobbies. There's people for doing it for hunting purposes. Talk about those applications, Don, and what you were doing, and what's that like to set those up and then retrieve that information that you're getting on those cameras.
Yeah, trail cams are a really good scouting tool. It's a motion triggered camera. You set the camera 1 to 3 pictures per trigger, or you could do video mode. They usually run, 6, 8 months, 10 months on regular 8 AA batteries. Purely scouting, though. I mean, people do it for hobbies. Me personally, it was kind of a hunting aspect. I've worked as a guide for a lot of years, and it's helped me be more efficient, know what animals are around, where their patterns are. So that's the main drive behind the trail camera for me. It's kind of that fun thing as well. Like, you set a trail cam up, and then a couple months later, you go pull the SD card, download it into your phone, and you see, a grizzly bear went through, a wolf, a big bull elk, mountain lion. It's always that you never know what you're going to get. And that was the exact same setup as it was for this ranch that I was on. The picture itself, though, the camera was actually on public land. It was outside of the ranch I work for, but a really deep hidden corridor almost for actually the public to get to that spot. I had the access through the ranch, which is no access anywhere else. It seemed like a really good spot. And I tried to focus on that area where I got the actual picture. And then I had about 5 cameras within 200-300 yards of that main one in a big circle around. So I wouldn't just get a picture of an elk or a deer or whatever. I would get where it's going or where it's coming from. That was kind of my main drive behind it.
So in the past, how long have you been doing this? And then I'll also talk about, what do you see normally? I mean, what kind of wildlife are in the area? And do describe, how long you've been doing that and basically what you've seen.
Yeah, I've done cameras I've ran cameras for about 10 years now. It started with just 1, and then it kind of made it up to like 3, 5, 10. And currently I'm sitting about 120 cameras overall, not in that same area, but spread out, through Southwest Montana. It's definitely something that's taken up most of my time. It's a hobby for sure at this point, but it's quite the process, just because, they make trail cams now that are wireless. So it'll take a picture and then it'll send it directly to your phone. But I only have a few of those ones. You have to actually physically walk up and pull the SD card to see what actually walked through. Normally, most areas I look for elk and deer. I like predators like, wolves, bears, cats. It's fun to get those kind of wild cards on camera, but it's mostly a prey scouting tool, not so much predator. But
what are some of the biggest animals that you've encountered on your cams and in person?
Biggest, there was one particular bull elk that I hunted 15 days in a row for this year, and it's a record book bull. I got him on camera, and he was my main focus all season. Grizzly bear, I got a 400 or 500 pound grizzly bear with a collar on, unbelievable big. I got like 40 pictures of that bear one night coming through. Pack of wolves. I've seen a black and a gray wolf have pups in the spring. I've followed the pups through. Same with mountain lions. A cat that has 3 kittens. Get them in front of camera.
Wow.
That's kind of the highlight of cameras for me.
All right, so now let's get into the meat of this. Obviously, you retrieved cameras one night, and you start going through the data, the actual photographs, and what do you see? I mean, obviously, you're getting some photos. This probably was a nighttime photo. You're getting photos at night, but this one is very different?
What actually started a little bit strange for me, I checked all the cameras that encompassed this one particular one, and I had a few elk and deer, nothing too spectacular. But I ran some lithium batteries in this particular one, and you'd probably fill up the SD card before you kill the camera because it's lithium. So when I got to the camera, I went to turn it on and check it, and the camera was completely dead. So that was a red flag right away because I just put it in about 2 months earlier. So as I pull the SD card, download the pictures, start ripping through them, seeing what I have, and I get to the last 3 because I had the camera set to take 3 pictures per trigger. When I got to the first of the last 3, I got the image that I captured, and then the next 2 were completely blacked out. You couldn't make heads or tails. All you could see was a timestamp on the bottom of the picture, but no variation, completely blacked out. And after it took those 3, the camera was dead. And to this day, that camera still doesn't function. It still has never taken a photo since. Wow. It'll just glitch when you turn it on, put new batteries in. Very odd.
So what was the first thing you noticed that was unusual about this photo? I mean, obviously it's very unusual, but
you're right. But I'm a little skeptical. I mean, I've caught a lot of trespassers on cameras through the years of ranches I've worked on and so on. So initially I saw the picture and it was bipedal. So I was like, oh, well, it's a person trespassing. Then I go to the next 2 and they're blacked out and that's the end. I thought, well, that's strange. So I go back to the image and I zoom in and I'm like, it's just odd. It's just weird enough that, it struck my interest. It was actually really eerie, me standing there in that moment. Like, well, what was this? What killed my camera? Where am I supposed to go from here? Like, do I put new batteries in? Well, and then I realized the camera didn't even work anymore. So then it kind of added to the whole story of, I don't actually know what this image is. And in that moment, I actually hit delete on the picture. I was like, I don't want this on my phone. This is creepy. And in that moment, I hesitated. I thought, it's just weird enough. I'll show a couple buddies and see what they can guess if it's a person or what they think it is. Took the camera down since it wasn't working anymore. And then I checked the last 2 on that same area on the way out, and it was normal. Those cameras were working just fine. So.
Yeah, interesting. Can you throw that pic up for me, Cassidy, just over my photo, if you would, please? And let me know when that's up.
It's up.
All right. So, yeah, super unusual. I know that, I shouldn't say I know. Don, did you try to recreate that and make that happen again?
I actually
kick out some of the variables there?
Yep. It was about a year later. I came across he's a really good friend of mine now, Jim Kinsey. I met him at an antler opener, and we were talking about trail cams, and I said, I got 100 plus. And he goes, you ever got anything weird? I said, as a matter of fact, look at this picture. Well, he decided to do a little interview with me there because he thought it was very strange. And he said, let's go back to that area. Let's set a camera on the same tree and let's recreate it. And we had, I probably had 100 pictures taken of me walking through the exact same spot. And out of 100 pictures, there's just no question. You can tell. You can see the distinction in my jeans, my coat. I tried to pull my hood over my head to make that bulbous head look. But there's no way. There's no way to actually even get close to the original image I had.
Wow. And so what was go ahead.
How long did it take before you decided to go public with this and kind of bring it out when you first got the photo to when you said, this is happening?
It's funny. I had that picture, like I said, I think I got it in the fall of 18, and I think it was the spring of 19 or 20. And I wasn't planning to go anywhere with it. I just saw this guy, hey, you got a bunch of cameras, you got anything weird? Well, there's this. And it was very basic. And he's like, man, you don't know what you have here. This is one of the weirdest pictures I've seen. And I'm like, okay. Like I just and then that led into History Channel, and then Discovery Channel, and then you wrote me, and there's been so many entities since that really play into that weird paranormal side to it.
Yeah, I think it's, my good friends Steve Pierce and John Goulet were in the early 1970s were traveling with their buddy Travis Walton when Travis got sucked up into in a spacecraft, and then they had to go to town and report the loss of their best friend, and so there's some stigma attached there is what I'm trying to get at of trying to report something like that. And even though, this is an odd photo and something that most people haven't seen before, I imagine you were skeptical and you were also a bit hesitant about reporting this. What'd that feel like, Don? And what came next?
It's a very good point, because in my very first interview on that mountain that day with Mr. Kinsey, I said in my interview, I would like to think it's paranormal, but people look at you really weird when you say that. So I let them tell me what they think it is, because like you said, it's almost taboo. You don't want to come out and say, oh, I got a fifth dimensional being, or I got a reptilian, or I got a, I've definitely had to learn what it looks like, the lingo, the language, and done my own research into the entity, because I realize I have this picture that's very iconic, but in the moment I had no idea. So it's been very interesting journey.
Right. John, where did you pick up the story? And when you contacted Don, what was your bit of investigation like, and your communication with Don? What were your first and initial impressions of that photo? Because it's bizarre.
Well, I first, of course, I've always knew about Redgate, so I just wanted to do a story about Redgate. I heard about the documentary film. I actually tried to reach out to the director, which I found out had died just a few months prior. So I was looking for sources. It was tough, but I think I got the Cutler brothers. I know them there, and I talked to them and just a few people. And I said, I'm looking for anybody that knows about strange things that are going on out there. And they put me in touch with Don. So I just I didn't even know about him. He didn't seek me out. And as a reporter, that's something, my skepticism on anything is people come to me and say, hey, I got something for you. I'm always thinking, okay, they're trying to sell me something, everybody, or they're trying to get something out. Well, Don, just talking to him, they just said, you should see this photograph, check it out. Don seemed very sincere. He wasn't seeking my attention. Why I asked how long it took for him to actually go public was just part of that. As a reporter, it made me think, this isn't a guy who, if you were to make a hoax or something, you don't sit on it for 2 years or whatever. And then, and I didn't get that impression from you. And I wasn't out there to interrogate you, but as a journalist, I've learned some things. Just your story seemed to add up the way you told it. People who tend to make up stories speak in a timeline. This is just some things I've learned from journalists and attorneys. They start from the beginning and say, I woke up in the morning, and they give you all the detail, and they just tell you the story without stopping to speak. But we don't do that when we tell stories. We get them in bits and pieces in our head. We don't speak in a narrative form. You weren't speaking like that, and you weren't, because people who are making up something, they make up a story in their head and they speak it the same way over and over again. This is why in court, attorneys will say, no, back up. Let me ask you about that. They don't let you just ramble on. You weren't like that. I mean, you spoke very, I thought you were very sincere about it. I saw the photo, and it is odd. Like I said, I take everything. I kind of look at things like as Occam's razor. maybe you've heard of the old Occam's razor, which is that don't multiply entities, or in another way, the simplest solution is usually the right answer. It's bizarre. In the end, if I'm looking at it, it could be somebody walking. You know, I don't know. I mean, it looks like there's a flash going, and I use video, and when if it's a dark area, there's a flash. I mean, you will get a blur and you'll get things. I mean, but it's bizarre. I can't prove it's not, you know, I mean, and you're not even saying what it is. I mean, that's the thing about you too. You're not saying it's a reptilian alien. You're just saying it looks odd. And again, that gives.
He did bring up reptilian, though. I want to hear about that.
He
but
brought
go ahead,
up the
John.
language. My eyebrow came up when you said that. My eyebrow lifted. I don't remember you, but you're learning the lingo.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're in that crew. Believe me, I've got the words too. And I don't know. I mean, but it definitely is odd to me. I would not, as a journalist, as a person, as a just who does believe in the UFO phenomenon and some paranormal stuff. I do believe, you know, I think there's something to it because we don't know everything. It certainly is unusual. But I always think, I always start, before I go extraterrestrial, I start terrestrial. It is possible humans walk upright. They sometimes walk through the woods. Maybe that camera picked up something and you got a very unusual blur. But I mean, I can't say I tell you, but I can't say it's a definite human, and I can't say I mean, is it a ghost? Is it an alien? Is it something extra dimensional? So it's definitely a very intriguing photo, and everybody is looking at it. My impression of you, Don, right away is I don't think you hoaxed it. So this makes me think. I mean, you know, you definitely caught something unusual, and knowing that area of Redgate and everything I've learned, who knows what it could be. But I always start simple. I mean, I'm intrigued with UFOs and all that, but I'm also, you know, I have the objectivity of a journalist, and I never want to jump the shark. Show me something, but let's let's not speculate too far into it. But like I said, I don't think it's a hoax photo, and the fact that you're getting all this attention definitely warrants. I think this is great, and I was more than happy to put that out there in a news story and let people know, because I think we got to look at things and question things. There's a lot, as I think Shakespeare wrote, there is far more to heaven and earth than in all your philosophy, Horatio. There is much more out there than we can even begin to understand. So it was a fascinating photo. I mean, what do you think, Cameron?
Well, I got to say, if you're in Montana and you're walking out in the woods, you're not doing it at night. If you have ever been in the woods at night, and we're not talking about it at a campground, I'm assuming. We're talking about, you know, out in a forest. Obviously, there's some tall grass there and some topography and a hill, and it's impossible to see. I've lived in the woods for 30 years, and it's black. And so look at this black right here, and then multiply being out in that black, and multiply that blackness by more blackness. And it's incredible. Right. It's intimidating. And obviously, if somebody had night vision, you'd see that on there. If they had some sort of light source, you would see that on there, very apparent. And I remember very well one night, you know, living out in the woods, hearing my trash cans go, and I thought, damn it, there's a bear there. I forgot to tie it down. So I ran out there, didn't turn on any lights, and I'm like, the bear's here. He's right here. And I can smell him. I can hear him. I can't see him. I could make out some branches, but we're a yard apart, and he's right there. And you know, that fur absorbs that blackness, and they just become one thing, and it's just a black wall. I saw a little glint of his eye, just barely, and backed up and got to the door. But I've been in situations like that. I've been out, in the wilderness camping, and had issues with lights and, getting up in the middle of the night, going to the bathroom. It's unbelievable. And if there's no moon, it's extremely intimidating, and you don't go out there and you're not just walking around the hills in the dark with no light source. So Don, this is something different that I hope you'll never experience on any other podcast, but this one, and I know you've done some, and I know you'll do a lot more, but Cassidy Lightwing, who's with us tonight, I would like to let you know that he's an expert. Literally, there's nothing that he can't answer when it comes to alien beings, as well as, I can't answer who he is and where he's come from. And there's a long history of him doing appearances and shows in my show and talking about his own life, which is very unusual. And, I put him on because I like to get his impression, because the answers that he comes up with are something that I would have never, ever thought of. So, Cassidy, if you look at this photo, I just want to know what you think, because I mean, his explanation will speak for itself. So I'll let him talk about and what he thinks. So,
well, first off, I want to say I don't think you're hoaxing either, Don. But at first, it's going to sound like I think you're hoaxing, so just bear with me. I can tell you right now, the skeptics are going to say somebody's grandma got away and was wandering naked through the jungle, and that's not what we're looking at here.
I'm not saying they don't do that there, because they do, but it would be hard. It would be hard.
Fair enough. But there are a few things here that are different from the human anatomy that I need to point out. The thing that convinces me that this is not human is the position of the ear. Now, I think what we're looking at here is an Arcturian that got a picture of itself snapped going, uh-oh. And have you had your equipment checked out by any kind of physicist, geologist, anybody with access to a Geiger counter? Because I'm pretty sure what you're going to find on your equipment is a light, pardon me, I'm so nervous, is a light haze of ion radiation.
I have not had it checked out.
Yeah. When I say Arcturians, keep something in mind. I'm utilizing the name for the species that humans have devised, the UFO crowd. They like to say, oh, Arcturians, oh, Zeta Reticuli, whatever. Yeah, I'm with you, Mr. Emeigh, on a lot of that stuff. But the position of the ear is what gives it away. A lot of the people saying it's aliens are going to get pushback saying, but there's a nose. The Greys don't have noses, and they're correct. But Arcturians do. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's the position of the jaw and the ear. Now, you guys can't really see it from the picture here, but I have it blown up on my screen. I tried to make it so I could share it with you guys, but I suck at this. So, yeah, what you're gonna see if you look at it, I'm sure people can find it and download it and see this for themselves. The limbs are not correct for a purport. They're not proportionally correct. You know what I mean? This is not human, in my opinion. So, yeah.
So when I look at the photo. Also from, when I look at it close up, I don't, for some reason, I don't see any detail when I look at it close up. For some reason, I think I can see some sort of skeleton structure, but when I look at it from a distance, I see ears. And I don't know if my mind's creating this, but I see a pretty good size black spot for an eye. And so
I like this. I like this analyzation of the picture, because for me, I mean, in 4 years, I can't tell you how many people have analyzed it. My favorite being, though, they had some expert on when I was on the History Channel. The proof is out there. He dissected the photo and really broke it down to its bare minimum, and he came to the conclusion that I did not tamper with it. It's not a hoax. It wasn't a Photoshop. It wasn't anything from my hand of creation.
Yeah, that's usually the first thing I look forward to, too. I love debunking hoaxers. It's my pleasure. So, yeah. So when I first saw this, I'm like, please go ahead.
No, you make a very good point. I mean, I think, Cameron, you made a good point. And having been out that area, yeah, that isn't a shortcut to the 7-Eleven.
Right. Yeah.
It is absolutely. I mean, there are a few houses, maybe ranches out there, but there's not. That is not a thoroughfare. I mean, there is no reason a human being would be walking in that in the middle of the night. And you're right, it's dangerous.
If you find yourself out there like that, you're in deep shit. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts unless you're well prepared and you have the right clothes and a big light source. But obviously, you don't see any of that.
I don't see a light at all.
Or a backpack or whatever.
Yeah.
If that's human, it's very, very frail, and I don't see it. Like animals smelling a sick human. I mean, I'm afraid of bears, so I might be biased, but I don't see it happening.
Well,
and honestly, part of the picture that's very strange is the direction that the being is going. It's downfall. You can't actually walk through the direction. It's completely opposite of how you would access that point. So for it to be night, not prepared, going in a direction that's 15, 20 miles that way before you even hit anything, the direction's weird in itself. That's always thrown me off.
May I ask a question, not understanding or not knowing the area?
Sure.
Now, is that area around cattle ranches or had a history of cattle mutations circa 1970 to 1995?
Mutations or mutilations?
Either, actually.
Okay, there we go.
I don't believe so. There is a cattle ranch that I was working on that borders right where that picture was taken, but that's on the public side. So there is public land grazing, but I don't know a history of mutilations, honestly.
So again, Cass, Montana was experiencing that in the early 70s and, 78, 79, 80, it kind of died off. So, Don's a young guy. And, John, I talked to you and I mentioned when we talked last that, Montana saw a huge amount of sightings and things just got weird. 1972 through, of course, if we talk about, Maelstrom and those experiences out there and those situations with our missile silos and the appearance of UFOs, that was prior, but cattle mutilations. And I always mention this, and people probably get tired of me saying this, that, it just became a thing and ranchers just picked up the cow with the front end loader and just went and dumped it in the lowest spot of the farm, and even behind my house where I grew up, if you walk 3 miles out there, you find, dead cows. And in most places, in the springtime, summer, through the fall, where that occurred most of the time, they're not losing cattle like they do in the wintertime. So, I'm no cattle expert, John, or Don, but Don, you're around cattle out there, and I don't know if you've heard reports of that, in the last 10 years even.
Yeah. Let me hit on this for a second.
Yes.
This is kind of interesting because I've captured this picture. I've been approached by a lot of people and a lot of very strange stories in the whole realm.
Yes.
As of recent, yeah, it's nonstop.
It's great.
Yep. About a month ago, I was contacted through a friend, a mutual friend. They work on a cattle ranch in the valley, North Valley. And this individual walked outside and she heard a cow mooing in a weird, distressed tone. Weird enough that she went into her house and told her husband about it. He said, "Oh, it's no big deal. We'll go check it in the morning." They go out in the morning and they come across this cow that its tongue was cut out, its butt was gone, and the udders were gone. And that was the only mark of any change on this cow. And
that's the one. Yeah,
that's it. Like they called me because, well, I got a picture, so I'm an expert.
Did they look inside?
They did not, and I probed them a little harder. Like, hey, take some pictures for me, or what else did you see? And the owner of the ranch hauled it to their dead pit and just threw it in.
The dead pit. That's what I was referring to. Every day, and the dead pit gets a lot of use, and it's right. And they don't think about it anymore. I mean, it's just like they don't even.
It's a dead cow.
there's no need unless, they see an obvious gunshot to the head or something, and then maybe call the sheriff.
Right.
But otherwise, it's people are so used to dealing with that, especially ranchers, that it's not even worth their time anymore to mess with.
Exactly.
I
Right.
Cameron, what I thought.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, and people wonder why I question human technology.
I don't enjoy it, but go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, Cameron, what fascinated me about the interview I did with you was, you talked about that this strange activity, UFO activity, cattle mutilations, what have you, was so common. What surprised me was how fascinated me about this was that even the ranchers just didn't talk about it, not so much out of skepticism, but just because it happened so much. It almost sounds like they, oh, I saw another thing in the sky. Oh, another cow mutilated. Yeah. Like they're also
makes
used
sense.
to it.
Well,
They just sort of accepted it.
Right.
And it's whereas if somebody somewhere else saw something like that, they'd be, talking up. I find it interesting. It's so commonplace maybe that, and you mentioned the 70s. Of course, there was the 1973 is an era is kind of a beginning of a wave of UFO sightings. Right. It's strange how they come in waves. And that was a moment of a lot of sightings. So from the 70s into the 80s, it is unusual how it happens. But I guess some people can literally get, I don't know, so used to it, it doesn't surprise them so much. And these ranchers seem like a lot of them sort of accepted it as like any kind of predation.
Well, and I think the flip side of the coin, you guys, is the fact that, it's a hard conversation to begin with. I mean, how do you start it? And being a person who's experienced some really wild stuff, it's really hard to go there. And, and there could be for a number of reasons. I mean, it could be traumatic, it could be whatever else, but, just to mention why, the ranchers and what they go through is the fact that, these are good old boys that they meet for coffee and they get together and they, depending on the time of year, they don't do it as often sometimes. And they're talking about high school sports and whatever, what Montana's like. It's really hard to even go there and it's a good old boys club. However, it just seems to me that that's a hard conversation to have. And did you ever talk about stuff like that, Don, with your friends, your family, whatever? I mean, obviously there's some weird stuff out in Redgate, Deer Lodge, Montana.
Right. Actually my first tenure at one of the ranches in the valley, I came across this cow one day and it had a big hole in the side of it, like a 4 or 5 inch perfect circle hole. And it was just bones, like the entire innards were completely gone. Very weird. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And I was really young then, and I went to the owner and I said, hey, I came across this cow. This is what I found. Show him a picture on my old flip phone. And he says, what'd you do with it? I said, I left it in the field. Well, just go haul it away. Go haul it to the brush. Go get rid of it. Let's not talk about this. Okay. Well, that's where it ended. And I kind of got that first dose of what you were saying, what that looks like. And it's kind of that good old boys club, but it's kind of a hard thing to talk about. And you don't want to, alienate yourself in being the ranch that has those weird experiences because we're all ranching. We're all doing this thing. So it might as well be a wolf, like John Emeigh said, or a bear, you just go with the flow.
Right. Yeah, nobody wants to be alienated.
Nobody.
Was that humor? We don't do that here.
You like that? You guys like that? I was working on that one tonight.
All right.
Yeah.
Good job, bro.
Yeah. I can't even imagine having that conversation and especially as a young kid growing up or, other people just in general that don't live on a farm or ranch or, waking up in the morning and say, hey, Mom, guess what happened last night? And that seems to be the common thread that people share who've had experiences or known people with experiences. I grew up in a little town, right on the edge of town. So it was just a vast millions of acres right behind my head all the time. And, my buddy and I, this kid knew stuff that I don't know how anybody else could possibly know. And I never ever questioned him about that, and it was the weirdest thing ever. Like, how do you know this? And he'd never been out in these places. How do you know this? We're going to find this out here when we're on one of our little trips out on the prairie. How do you know this? And I never ever knew. So there's a lot of people out there with some knowledge that they aren't sharing because honestly, they're not willing to open up. And it could be, well, it is because of the many, many stigmas that are attached to us. And it just doesn't have to do with just aliens and ghosts and Bigfoot, but it has to do with a lot of factors that we deal with on a regular basis that conversations that we should be having with us and our children just don't happen. So, Don, of course, I'm going to ask this because you got trail cams. You didn't mention Bigfoot, Sasquatch. You're just over the hill there, literally from one of the Sasquatch Montana hotspots, the Lincoln, Avon area.
Right.
You've been in that area? Do you know people in that area? Because, I had a cousin who went hunting there, and in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning, it was 10 degrees outside. Somebody came running down the road, soaking wet, into their camp and said that he had crossed, I think it might have been the Blackfoot, one of the forks of the Blackfoot River, swam across there in the dark in the middle of the night and trying to outrun this thing. It's been chasing him for, and it was weird. So Bigfoot.
Let's hit on
briefly.
Bigfoot. It's funny on the show, The Proof is Out There. They brought an anthropologist on who compared my image to Bigfoot. They wouldn't go on a paranormal side of things. It's bipedal, so let's see, is it Bigfoot? No, it's not Bigfoot. It's a guy in a hoodie. But being from Deer Lodge and Avon area, Lincoln, I've heard of the Bigfoot story numerous times. And actually, I have a really fun one. World Weekly News. You remember Bat Boy?
Yes.
That entity.
That's where I get most of my stories. Go ahead.
That makes sense. I'm the headliner of it. They have a story about Bigfoot being hauled in a trailer over McDonald Pass, which is the pass from, Avon, Elliston to Helena.
Right.
And Bigfoot broke out and took off down the mountain. And there was a gentleman from Texas that called the sheriff's department in Deer Lodge and said, I will give you $10,000 cash if you show me where he broke out so I can put my dogs on Bigfoot. Yep, true story. And that shows you, how that draw to the Bigfoot itself or anything different, it shows you what that looks like, and how people are almost enamored by, certain myths or certain legends or what their drive is. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that, there's some big beasts in your area, in that area we just mentioned. I don't know if this is an actual photo from that area, but of course there's the one where somebody hit the gigantic grizzly on the highway, and they show these big paws, and I've seen it pop up even in Canada as being taken up there, but I think it was in that area. It
was Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I thought that came from. So huge beasts, big animals, and of course, one of the most paranormal guys I ever knew, not but knew of people who picked him up hitchhiking the Unabomber along there,
right.
Heading to the post office in Missoula. And, it's, I hate to laugh about that, but I mean, it seems so strange now, but I mean, that is a place that, people go to get away from other people. However, they're not wandering around the woods, in the middle of the night. So is that photo, when I look at it, I see a lot of grass there. Looks like, more than knee-high grass. So is it, obviously you probably posted the camera up in a clearing? Is that, what's the topography like, and what's the situation with other vegetation like big trees, and what kind of trees?
Yeah, it's mostly just blue pine, lodgepole pine. That's actually a really old, I'm going to say 50, 60 year old logging road. is what that was posted on. And that's what's so interesting, like I was saying earlier, is the logging road runs lengthwise in the picture. So you're looking down the road where that entity is crossing the road into just unknown, vast downfall, thick timber where you couldn't actually travel through. So that's also a strange part to the picture, is it's going the wrong way. Like it's not going up or down the road, it's crossing it.
And when you're saying an old logging road, I mean, people don't picture a highway or a country gravel road. It's probably less developed now than. There probably hasn't been a vehicle on that road in 40 years. Right. It's just been leveled out with a grader back in the day. And you couldn't drive it now because there's probably deadfall on both sides of that photo everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
You mentioned lodgepole, which is usually higher elevation. What's the elevation there?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to say 50.
Yeah.
Ooh, what's a good guess? 5,500 feet, maybe.
So it's high up and it's cold. I mean, even in the summertime, it's cold. It's pretty inhospitable place.
Right.
You know, people can't even imagine what Montana's like because there's millions and millions of vast expanses of acres of wilderness that haven't been touched or aren't touched, and there's not a lot of people here, so it's fairly odd that somebody would just be out there again. I know I've said this and I'll say it over and over again, but John, on a regular basis, yearly, I would imagine there's 2-3 people that come to you with some fairly amazing stories. How do you decide what you're going to put on your show, your newscast, and what are you hearing out there? I mean, what's that like?
Well, I mean, it all comes down to, it's credibility. It's whether this person is genuine. If they got an interesting story, and like Don's story was interesting, did not seem like a charlatan to me, I went, I'll go with it. One in particular, a guy I interviewed a few, I think about 2 years prior to the stories I did last spring, was you might know him, Dr. Michael Masters.
Yeah, I know Michael.
Yeah, he is an anthropologist here at Montana Tech. Highly respected, Ohio State grad, PhD.
Tenure at the college. Yeah.
Real great guy. He wrote a book when I kind of one of the first UFO stories I sort of did for KXLF was his book, Identified Flying Objects. But you look at a guy like Dr. Masters, you don't really get any more credible than that. I mean, this is he is a highly academic person, very credible, tenured. And his stories about, his theory using actual scientific approach. And of course, you may have heard his theory. UFOs perhaps are time machines.
Yeah, we are those people from the future.
We're those folks.
Yeah.
Why not? And I think what he said was, if I was an anthropologist, and he is an anthropologist, but if I had access to time travel, I would do that.
Right.
I would go back and study the Cro-Magnons, those folks, and of course you would be very elusive, and you would, and as somebody who always I lean toward extraterrestrials, people from other planets, traveling is what I think is probably what this is. It made me stop and pause and listening to his argument. And I think the funny thing is, since that came out, I'm seeing more people in the UFO community sort of taking that concept of maybe this is a time travel. Maybe we're seeing something like that, these UFOs. And I got to credit Dr. Masters for that. I think he's brought that into the discussion. And again, it comes down to credibility. And that's what kind of drew me to that story. We did that story and it blew up.
Right.
And he's everywhere now. He's being interviewed. I mean, you can't you really can't discredit the guy. And I think he's changed the dialogue a little bit, the discussion of, well, maybe we're dealing with interdimensional time travel. Maybe it's not the standard, just, somebody from another galaxy coming in. And maybe it's both. But, that's the kind of stuff that just fascinates me. And it comes down to just credibility. I feel like they're bringing up an interesting point, and it's worth studying. It's worth looking into. It's worth telling the story. To me, as a reporter, I think when I come down, people ask me, how do I judge a story? What do I think makes a story worthy? And I always think this: if it's interesting to me, it'll be interesting to somebody else. That's what it comes to. If it's interesting, and then explore it, and put it out there, as long as you feel it's credible. And when I do that, I have no problem putting it out there. I think these kind of subjects, they don't frighten me. They don't.
No,
I don't
shouldn't.
worry about it.
It's part of who we are, really, John. We're not just straight laced, 9 to 5, college educated. We're people of all walks of life who have a lot of different experiences. And also, I just want to touch on this really quick, that it's become commonplace now in academia, because, I've had at least five different guests who are basically college professors, including Harvard professor Avi Loeb, who wrote that fairly amazing book about this object that we've seen come through our solar system and pass through, that obviously came from outside of the solar system, and which is pretty unusual. Not so unusual, but pretty unusual that we were actually able to see that. And but it's not just UFOs. I know Butte is a major hotspot. Everybody there has a ghost story. Literally, under your feet right now, there's hundreds of bodies under your feet, literally, and that's kind of an unusual place to be. There
is, Butte is a city of immigrants. We're people here came from everywhere. Certainly, they brought their myths, and maybe they even brought their superstitions. But this is a city that's experienced so much trauma, and I know a lot of people that work in buildings where things happen, very unusual things happen, and almost, and they say, where are the haunted houses in Butte? I'm like, throw a rock, you'll hit one. I lived in an apartment that was a former, it was right next to one of the old Catholic churches. And this was a former convent, like where the nuns stayed. And my apartment was actually the altar. And I say this, like, I've never seen a UFO. But that was the first time I've ever seen, at least it twice. I've had two experiences in that apartment where I've woke up and saw a shadow that could have looked like a nun. And I saw a rocking chair in my house one afternoon just start rocking, the recliner.
What's with ghosts and rocking chairs? Come on.
I know. What is it? They love to rock. I've never, and I'm a skeptic to ghosts. Right. I'm not a Bigfoot guy. I know people that have seen ghosts, people I trust, and I believe them. I've never seen them. But, the first case, I might have just still been asleep. But I actually reached out. I was like, and thought I saw. But the rocking, the recliner moving, I saw it happen right in front of my very eyes. And I looked everywhere to make sure the window wasn't open. I have a dog, but the dog wasn't near the chair. I looked all around to try to explain that. I couldn't. So, that's my one supernatural experience that I can really fully remember. And it happened in Butte.
Right.
And I think, maybe there is something to it. And there's people, like you said, going back before, when I look at people that are when I say people that I think are trustworthy or reputable, it doesn't necessarily have to be academics and things like that. I mean, common people everywhere, people of all walks of life are seeing things, and they're seeing unidentified flying objects. They're experiencing things that are supernatural. And I think the big thing is they're not afraid, and they shouldn't be, to talk about it. I think we're getting to a part where we don't ridicule like we used to, and we don't think, oh, you're off your meds. I mean, I think we all have that. I think it is, again, it's just a subject that I am more than happy to explore anytime. And I think the more we in the mainstream media explore these, like we do any story, that I think more people will come out and be willing to open up, and we may find something, we may discover something amazing down the road.
Bingo.
We're yet to find it, but I think we're seeing it. And Don, your photo is part of that. It's a part of that. Yeah. That journey, that search. And I'm glad you came forward. I'm glad you didn't hit the delete button.
Don't delete those. So Don Bromley, another question I had for you is, when I started this podcast, I thought, I'm going to tell my story, and then I'll learn a few things, and then I'll start gradually start interviewing my favorite guitarists and people like that, which I tried to do, but nobody who listened to the podcast would have that. I mean, they wanted to hear what we're doing tonight. They wanted to hear, and it never could get too weird or too strange or too crazy. I mean, if I ever thought that it was over the top, oh no, they were just getting started, which is utterly the truth and completely amazing to me. But so Don, now that you've experienced this, I want to know, I mean, obviously your mindset has changed a little bit, and I'm assuming you start looking into these different things and in different interviews and people mentioning different people. Of course, I mentioned Travis Walton tonight and Steve Pierce and John Goulet. So are you looking at those situations and trying to find common ground, and have you found common ground with people that have similar experiences that you did?
Yeah, it's really interesting for me because this is going on, I think, 4 years I've had this picture, and I have a very entrepreneurial mindset anyway. But I never actually went down this rabbit hole. I've always had this in my back pocket, but it's never been the face of me. I've never been that guy. So the more this goes about, the more notoriety this picture gets, the more I find myself really diving into different stories, different backgrounds, different histories of A, B, and C. It's really intriguing for me now. At this point, I'm definitely trying to learn about more parallels to my picture or my experience. Even if it's a completely different country, it's a similar experience that someone had, and I'm definitely drawn to that for sure.
Right. And so what's the feedback been like from people who have heard the story, heard you on other shows? And first of all, talk about, who's been reaching out to you and what they're telling you, and then talk about locally what that's been like.
It's been interesting, especially when my big one was Carbon TV with Mr. Jim Kinsey. When that dropped, that got me a lot of notoriety with History Channel, and then Discovery Channel, and then with John Emeigh, especially when John interviewed me, actually hitting on a point from earlier. John was recommended to me from Dr. Masters, because I took Dr. Masters' anthropology class at Tech like 7 years ago or so. And then I brought the Cutler brothers to the screening because, we're all kind of tied that way. But when that dropped on the news, I got some pretty good feedback because I was, for a lack of terms, putting Deer Lodge on the map and Redgate on the map, which was good for me because I like that. I like that draw. I like that attention for the town itself. But I also find it very interesting. You have that other side of the coin, and you have people that, are completely against it. Like, oh no, like, this guy's crazy. You should be in the loony bin. I actually had a gentleman from town bring me a box of Fruit Loops.
Yeah, but that's you expect that there. I mean, here, I mean, that's why.
But that's very generous.
Yeah.
That's very generous. The Fruit Loops are good.
They're wonderful people there, though. Really.
Eat every one of them.
His words when he showed up, he goes, "I would have got you these Fruit Loops sooner, but I was abducted on the way here."
Oh,
he was.
Yeah,
better than torches and pitchforks.
He knows. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
It could have been worse, but
could have been worse. But I like the draw that it's done for the town and kind of the recognition around Redgate, because it's been such a long-running paranormal, high strange area that this picture is kind of put it in concrete that, you know, there's a lot more behind the scenes than most people know.
Interesting. So, Cass, you gotta weigh in on what you thought this creature was. So just expand it. We got like 10 minutes, so expand on that. Who really are they? What are they? And what are they doing here and why? And what can we expect from, I call them guys all the time, these guys.
Well, for starters, I'd like to point out a couple of things about this photograph. You guys, I want you guys to, when you're looking at the screen, notice its legs and the way its spine is moving. That thing is having trouble with Earth's gravity. Now, that could be an old person still, because, you know, trouble with Earth's gravity.
Because they do hike in the middle of the night up there.
Right. You know, look at the way it's picking up its leg. You know, it's that's not somebody is experienced with grass trying to walk over it. Right. You know. That's somebody having trouble. Now, you mentioned it's on a hill, so that could account for it. But again, I don't think so. So now who they are, now the tribe that people generally refer to when I'm talking about Arcturians. Now, that's not what they call themselves. That's the UFO crowd. They tend to name the different groupings of lights in the sky and whatnot. They have dubbed this particular tribe Arcturians. Now, first thing I want you guys to understand is they are our friends, pretty much. As B would say, that's good and bad.
I disagree with that, but go ahead.
Well, there are many tribes
none of
here.
these
Not
are
all
my
of them are
friends.
good.
Go ahead.
Well,
just saying.
Think of it like a level of altruism. You know, if they didn't understand if they didn't understand human morality, they'd be doing these experiments on humans instead of cows. You know.
Now,
so, yeah,
I have an. My version of that differs too. Go ahead. Keep talking about these guys, please.
No. That is completely okay. Remember, there is good and bad in all things.
Right,
that's why we group ourselves out there by tribe rather than by genetic caste or clan, you know. So Arcturians are relatively close to humans. They're not a primate phenotype like your species, but they're close enough. One of the big mysteries in the galaxy is why is there such an attachment to the humanoid shape? And the reason why is for energy efficiency. That's why so many species out there have a humanoid shape. You see? So,
my energy is not efficient.
I noticed on this creature cast, I don't know if you see, I'm looking at the photo on my other screen here, and I'm almost seeing like a jaw. Like, to me, like a mouth is slightly open. Are you guys seeing that? And what does that tell you?
Well, that was one of the first clues that it's not really a Zeta Reticulum or a quote-unquote gray, because they don't have articulating jaws, you know. One of my only claims to fame is that I can describe these things with forensic accuracy. And then when things like the Nazca mummies were found, they would X-ray them and they're like, oh, crap, Cassidy's right. Yeah, Cassidy's right. So, no, you're absolutely right.
It's slightly open.
One of the things that I noticed is the neck is in complete disproportion. I mean, it's like it's barely even there. And of course, people have said an oversized head. Yeah. Not as big as some, but the neck is, you know, you can definitely, especially from a distance, you can see it's just like on a swivel. And obviously that would be tough. And then that, if it is a right arm sticking out there, that's in way disproportion to the legs. You know, it's
right.
It's, you know, there's literally no hand. So, you know, that's interesting to me. And, yeah. And I think the left arm is gripping that I was going to make a joke, a phaser, but I don't know what that is.
I mean,
that would be pretty cool.
Could be anything. I want
to. The arms don't look human to me. I mean, it looks like they're smaller. I don't know. It just looks like very unusual. Like that. That's the one part of it that doesn't seem as very human.
Yeah, that's part of what I was. That's part of what I was referring to with the limb proportions. I mean, a skeptic would say, "Oh, somebody's doing T-Rex arms," but no, if they were doing T-Rex arms, the wrist would be higher up the chest. All the normal debunking angles I can think of, the answer is just no.
Yeah, Cass isn't the only alien friend I have. Like Kristen Harding had messaged me and says the Arcturian nuked his camera.
Yeah, they do that.
So
that's another thing. Yeah. That's another reason why I said look for these specific types of radiation. So you can at home.
Are they doing this purposely, or is it some sort of byproduct of whatever activity that they're doing out there in the woods in the middle of the night?
Well, the Arcturians are not above getting caught by surprise, so I'm not going to try to cover for this guy. But he could have been out there doing something, scientific and then got snapped by a camera, or he could have been letting himself get seen and then fried your camera. There's something to be said for the process of asking questions like, are we alone? Who built the pyramids? And what that does, it triggers your brain to think in rather different directions, which force the blood flow, back to the hypothalamic regions rather than the prefrontal cortex, which allows you to understand things a little bit better. So one of the things that they'll try to do is literally inspire humans to think bigger, think better, think more empathy, more eyes to
When's
the
that going to start happening?
And I wish I could tell you that.
The inspiration has died.
I'm fascinated. Where are they from? Where would this I guess alien? Where would they come from? What can you tell me about? I guess Where do they come from?
Well, the Orions come from an area around about Orion's belt, one of those star systems. They're not from the planet you call Arcturus or the star or whatever you call Arcturus. That's a colloquial name given to them by the UFO crowd. So, but yeah, there's a lot of activity.
It's interesting because I've heard the pyramids. You mentioned that the pyramids some think are lined to Orion's belt, almost in that same fashion. Interesting.
There are people, I don't know, Cass, if you believe this, but I mean, there's people who speculate that they're basically predecessors to humans. Are they?
No, they're a different phenotype entirely. Humans were not brought here by aliens. Sorry, folks. Sorry, UFO crowd. They're going to hate me for saying that. Humans are very much born and raised here, right where God put them.
So one of the things that he didn't mention, and I think it's worth mentioning, is that, there are species that supposedly have pale, almost translucent skin. So, very little nose in the nose. They do have hair, big eyes, which from a distance I can see eyes, or an eye. They've been talked about as having this grace and beauty. I don't know if that's true.
Depends on the guy.
Yeah, and I don't know this, but for sure maybe they are the ones who would actually use paint or whatever and decorate their faces and skin. And do you know anything about that, Cass? Like kind of temporary tattoo type thing going on with the Arcturians?
Well, they love art, they love music, they love things like that. They love fashion. So that doesn't surprise me at all. The various stories that I've heard from the human side about visitors who painted themselves up are usually referring to the Pleiadians, which are not the same race. So,
but they've been compared to. I mean, I think that's why people had discussed that they could be predecessors of humans because of their similarity in architecture, possibly similar to our tribes from the Southwest, Pueblo, and even the Mayans, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, specifically the natives of the Andes mountain range talk about the Arcturians, and again, you're absolutely right. They would fit like the human standard of beauty, mostly because of the proportions of the eyes, nose to mouth. But that doesn't mean they're human. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, it's interesting, but
the interesting part's coming.
yeah, that was the other part of my question. What is coming? What's their purpose if they're here? Obviously, there's people who feel there's many different species here. I've actually been told by one person who is equally as well versed on the topic as Cassidy that there's over 150 species. But what is the purpose of these guys, Cass?
Well, again,
they have
we
an
organize
agenda?
ourselves. Oh, they have an agenda. They wouldn't come this way for nothing.
I knew you were going to say that. Go ahead.
Now, again, that's why we divide ourselves by tribe rather than by genetic caste or clan. So this particular guy we're looking at right here, he might very well be part of the scientific delegation. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but anyway, that's why I was asking about the cattle. What they're working on right now is the ability to essentially interact with humans. We get this question a lot on my show where, well, what about like the ancient statues of the Anunnaki? They always have a purse. That purse is a life support system. It normalizes the radiation between species. Okay. Now,
I thought it was a laptop.
Maybe it's also that. It's really high tech, Either way, what it does is it normalizes the radiation. So they don't die from human presence and humans don't die from their presence. Something that a lot of abductees, they're the ones like, for example, Betty and Barney Hill, my favorites, they displayed radiation sickness in varying degrees for the rest of their life. And pretty recently, NASA put forth a theory that planets have their own radiation. So moving between, like from here to Mars, may not be as easy as they think, which they're not thinking it's going to be easy. So,
hey, Don,
yeah, that's what that does.
Hey, Don, obviously you're going to get more interest in this. And again, I mean, so up on my screen right now, the articles that I have, like the Globe Mirror and places like that, have all shown up since the 4th of January. So obviously it's the story's still out there. People are going to contact you. If they do, what kind of access do you feel comfortable giving people? And do you feel that it's worth, tearing apart your camera and having somebody look at that? Because I'd like to know about that, actually.
Yeah, I'm intrigued myself. I've had that camera, like I said, for 4 years in my garage, and once in a while I'll just decide to plug in new batteries to it and see what happens. And it's all the same. It's just this error code that just glitches on every setting, even from the test mode. I like
loading electrons.
Yeah, I like seeing where this is going and the notoriety and just the attention that it's really bringing to the entire paranormal subculture. It's almost a gateway. And I'm seeing that firsthand, like I said, with how many people approach me with their stories and their experiences. They almost confide in me because I have this picture. So I obviously, I'm a safe place for them to say, well, I had something fly over me, or I saw something one night. And it's really grown. And as of lately, especially with the mirror, the sun, and where that's going, I'm starting to realize this is a lot bigger than I could even have imagined it to be. And I'm all about it. I'm all about getting it out there and really learning that culture and being part of that growing movement.
Thank you.
I'd like you to throw together another museum to rival the one in Clancy, because I think that's really cool. That's like, when I discovered that, I was like totally shocked. And then I messaged the gentleman there and he messaged me right away. And I love the fact that we have a Jesse Marcel museum in Montana. And,
Yep.
I don't want people to start packing up and coming here at all, but I think it's really cool that we got so much happening here and it's so incredibly interesting. By the way, Don, I don't know if you've ever looked at the warranty on that camera, but I'm sure there's a radiation clause in there somewhere that voids the warranty, and I would vouch for you that that's not your fault.
Voided if zapped by Beetlejuice.
In case you probably had it for a long time. They probably have a really good warranty on there that says, if you use it outside or in inclement weather, it voids the warranty, even though they're like bulletproof. But, so I want to thank you guys, and we're at the end of our time here, but it's been a hugely enjoyable experience to talk to two great Montana people. And I want to say that first and foremost, because
Thank
this
you.
This is one of these shows that I've been waiting for and thinking about a lot and looking forward to. And I knew just because I wanted to have a lot of fun, and because we're on a kind of a, you know, sort of common ground in the same playing field. It's not like, you know, I meet people and you know, yes, we have a lot to talk about, but you know, for the most part, you know, it's stories like this that really pique my interest, because it's sort of, you know, it's that data that people cry out for and what they're indeed looking for. And there's so much of that it doesn't exist, or there's, you know, quote unquote data that people won't give us access to. We're not allowed to see that data, you know, and I don't know why. So Don, have you ever been approached by any government entity or had any weird experience? Because, you know, I'm a little paranoid, not hugely paranoid, but I get some emails and you know, things happen that so bizarre, you know, especially there's a couple of guys that I exclusively talk to that I've done stories on, and, you know, I hear weird things from, you know, weird calls and what about you? Any government agencies, CIA knock on your door? I mean, I'm serious about that.
It's interesting. This is one of those very random stories I have. About a year after I got, about a year and a half, end of the summer. So what, 14, 15 months after I got the picture, I was actually working on that ranch that I have the camera access to, even though the camera's public. Like I said, the main ranch is a big piece. I came out this locked gate, and I had this other ranch hand with me, and he was getting out of the Jeep and opened the gate, and I drive through, and I look up and I said, man, you see that up there? Nobody can be driving on that road. And it was this black Suburban, and I'll never forget it. It had these tinted windows, and the driver window was down, and you could see, because I had binoculars, they had binoculars watching us. And we sat there for a little bit. I said, well, they can't be up there. Should we call the game warden or, you know, the cops? Like, about that time, it came flying off the mountain, and it drove by us as fast as you could on this dirt road. And the main part of this that the ranch hand and I said to each other in very much shock and disarray is, it was all blacked out, like I said, and the tint on the windows are black, but there was no license plate. Mm-hmm. And it blew by us as fast as it could. That was the only moment where I thought, oh, well, that's what I get for having this picture. It all tied, you know, specific time frame. And I've been asked by people, like, has anybody ever checked your camera? Like you guys were saying, I can't believe nobody's wiped it or shown up and just taken it from you, which hasn't happened. Knock on wood, I guess. But that was the only very strange experience I ever had with that. So
I just quickly, I was in that Town Pump, which is just west of Butte. Is it Rocker?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Rocker.
Yeah.
So I had pulled in there, and I did a couple really weird not weird podcasts, but just highly unusual. And I just kind of got this going, but I've been very vocal and very, I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people knew me and you know, was on other shows prior to me starting this podcast and was involved with some other people. But anyway, I pulled in there, and, you know, I was always kind of looking for weird things. And the Suburban pulled up right on the other side of the pumps. Nobody got out. There was a guy in a hoodie. He had sunglasses, and he just sat there, and he didn't do anything. So I was going to go into McDonald's there, and I walked in. I thought, I'm going to turn around, just see what he's doing. So sat in my car. He sat there, never got out of the car. I left, and then followed me west until I think it was the Anaconda overpass. And I went under that overpass, and this is a true story. He didn't come out from under that overpass. And I looked back, and he wasn't there. So that was weird. Wow. So anyway,
interesting.
That's just, right? You know, me, that's a me
Best thing to do with MIBs is just go right up and talk to them. It's awesome.
No thanks. I had a pistol, but no thanks.
Nah, they won't hurt you.
Sure.
I was in.
But what
Go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say, what's the old saying? Just because we're paranoid doesn't mean they're not watching us.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
I like
You know,
I always wanted that bumper sticker.
Say that. I haven't had that. I haven't had anybody watch. Since
You will now.
I've had emails of people saying I've seen strange things, but I haven't had that weird, that scary kind of feeling of people.
Give it a minute.
Checking me out.
I'm
on.
Go ahead.
I'm just like a media guy. Maybe they don't want to mess with a guy because, I'm on like every night.
Yeah,
but guys like, that are on the shadows, maybe they go,
right.
maybe they mess with guys like you more. I don't know.
Well,
you know karate.
You have the potential. You're a curler too. You can curl
I'm a curler. You don't mess with that curler.
I know.
That 26-pound rock.
I know. That's huge. But I was in Shelby, Montana on Sunday and driving down Highway 2 next to the railroad track and where a bunch of trains are parked, and some dude with a lot of spray paint and a lot of spare time devoted one whole rail car, and there was the biggest graffiti on any of them and it's just said MIB, and which was cool. And he did the background and it was black and silver, and if you know anything about silver spray paint, that's one of the most expensive. So yeah, it was huge. And wow. To do that would have cost, I don't know, $1,000 probably in spray paint. So it's incredible. So there's people out there who are thinking all the time. And so like us tonight, getting together, this is super important, talking about this because these are issues and things that happen. And it's great that we can have an experience like that and get the word out and let people know. And I think the stigma has gone away. Our educational institutions, people are talking more open about it. So it's very rewarding to have two fine gentlemen from Montana like you talking about this. I want to thank Don Bromley, and just super nice guy. I'm glad that I finally got a hold of you, and I should have done it sooner, but because I saw John's story quite some time ago, and I apologize again for not doing that sooner, but it's only so worthwhile now that we can do this at the first of the year, and things have changed so much, and people have more spare time or making more spare time too to listen to shows like this. Thank you, Don. And
yes,
John,
no problem.
John, I can't say enough about you. I think it's amazing what you do. You're probably the real news guy in Montana. I don't like to get down on the news here, but it's I see people try to emulate newscasters in bigger markets. I mean, you're the real deal. I mean, you're like the most believable guy I've ever seen. Bingo. On news, and I'm not kidding when I go through Butte, and I've stayed there, and even I just saw on your Facebook page, which I didn't see, sort of a little vignette of stories you do, and you were fly fishing out there in your tie and dress shoes,
yeah.
and standing in the water or not meaning to stay in the water,
yeah.
And it's awesome, yeah. And I love to see that. Butte's a real place, a real town. I've never met, and I never will meet people that are more genuine and nicer. You sit down and the tavern, Goodwill Tavern I was in, somebody would buy you a drink. They'd put a plastic old 25-year-old Rainier cup in front of you to designate that somebody just bought you a drink.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't buy the first one, and it wasn't the first place I'd been to, and I had 8 sitting there, and there's 3 people in the bar. I mean, who buys somebody like 4 drinks? I mean, buy me one. This is a guy that shouldn't be drinking of anything. So I was
and the Goodwill has one of the best views in the city, by the way.
Right. It does. In the corner right there. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. You see all the lights. And if you've never been to Butte, Montana, and see what they do at nighttime, every night of the week, they have, of course, the college is lit up. They have all these elevators that used to lift all this massive ore out of all these mines. They're everywhere up on the hill in the town, and they're all lit up, and it's completely incredible. And I love going there each and every time. They have some food there that you would only get there, as well as Deer Lodge has that, Anaconda, Montana has that, but it's like, it's my go-to place. You know, I got to stop there and eat. And I'm not going to stop at one place. I'm going to go to two places. I'm going to have a pork chop John, and I'm going to have a Butte pasty, and I'm going to have probably a pork chop John's at two different places because one has grilled buns, the other one doesn't. And then the Wop Chop down at the freeway.
The Stan and Muzzies.
Stan, yeah. And
Stan and Muzzies, yep.
I'm getting hungry.
My kids were, I took my kids in there. And one was, I guess he was 14 and the other one's about 20 at the time. And they were just appalled. This humongous sandwich just dripping, you know, with grease. And then, you know, you're in a cinder block building and, you know, the decor in there is from, you know, the late 70s, early 80s and beer signs and places like that. But it's beautiful. You know, it's beautiful. The first time...
And to the side of JoJo's. You got to have the JoJo's.
And the first time I was ever at the Goodwill Tavern, I'm not kidding you, something happened and part of the rear end of the bar had fallen down. And so you could see the old inner wall and what they had used for basically drywall, whatever it was. And then the wall was stuffed with rags, lined with cardboard boxes. And, you know, that was from probably the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then this is the best thing I love about this. And I shouldn't say it's Butte, Montana, but all the heat comes out of a register in the men's room. So it's 55 degrees in the bar and you go into the men's room and it's 155 degrees. And I was just like, God, this is awesome. You know, I just love it.
Butte is the best town.
Right.
It is the best town. I'm staying here forever.
Right. So anytime that I ever just feel down and that I'm bored and it's only because I'm doing it to myself, because Montana has great, interesting places, interesting people like Mr. Don Bromley and John Emeigh. And, of course, Cassidy is probably going to move here. And I want to thank all three of you for being here. And wish you a happy 2022. Good night, gentlemen, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My Alien Life is a podcast for those who have a story to tell, and I really wish I could get to all of your stories. I promise to do my best. I want to take a minute and talk about Patreon. What is Patreon? Think of it as an online tip jar. Patreon is a website that gives everybody in the world an opportunity to become a patron and support the artists they believe in. The great thing about Patreon is you get to decide how much you feel comfortable contributing each podcast. As you know, some weeks I get a burst of energy and I want to produce lots of new content. It's expensive to make podcasts. There's the electronic gear, web domain fees, web hosting fees, t-shirts, postage stamps, tinfoil hats, alien assault spray, and much, much more. And remember, things break. No matter what you decide, please listen to the podcast. That's really what I want. We're a team, and your support is what keeps me going. Thank you for being amazing. Keep listening to My Alien Life podcast. Be sure to check out the podcast every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern and catch the live TV show on YouTube, or stay up late and listen to the podcast wherever fine podcasts are found. You can find the entire show, library, and stories, as well as my links to Patreon at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. I'm Cameron Logan. Thank you so much for your support, and this is My Alien Life.